and then I'll get out to social media. Right, so we are live now. So it'll take a few minutes before people start coming in and it's being shared. But right.
Okay, so we're up and running.
We are up and running. So yeah, folks, thanks for joining us tonight. We're here with another live Q&A. We haven't done one in a while, but we're starting off with a good one again. So we're with Steamer, and if you haven't already seen his initial two-part interview, he's a former F-14A and B pilot. He flew with the Starfighters and the Diamondbacks. And then he did an exchange with 56 on the Tornado F3. So plenty to talk about here. I mean, what a career! Amazing. Two of my favourite jets, obviously. But yeah, Steamer, what's been happening on your end? Why the folks get the questions coming in since the last time we chatted?
Just enjoying life, appreciative where I am. They live up in Wisconsin, getting ready for winter and stuff right now. But we had Memorial Day come through and stuff, and thought about a lot of the old guys I flew with. People that didn't make it this way, that weren't as fortunate as we were. Got in touch with a couple of fathers of guys that I knew. And just, you get to the community, and it's a very exciting community and stuff. But we lose a lot of people too in the Navy. And so, it's one of those things, there's a lot of heartfelt memories, and, it's some sadness and some real joy. But yeah, anyway, just a lot of that went through the household, but just enjoying my family, getting ready, hopefully, to do a little bird hunting this fall and a little fishing. So, just enjoying life and appreciating it for what it is.
Brilliant stuff. And I've got a couple of questions to get in before they start coming in from our followers and viewers. Obviously, when you were growing up, you've got a family. Did they think, wow, my dad's a fighter pilot? Or did it kind of wear off? It's just like, yeah, he's a pilot. Or was that cool factor there for them?
Well, I tell you what, it depends. Not really. The kids are like, that's all they ever knew. And I kind of finished up and went to the airlines, by the time I had children. My daughter was born in England when I was on my exchange tour over there, my oldest. But she was pretty young to understand it. And my parents were just worried. My mom was doing a lot of praying when I was flying off the carrier. So there was not really much of a wow factor. My dad did come out with me on a Tiger cruise and got to drive the ship, the USS America, and saw us, operating. So for him, there was a bit of wow. But the rest of them were kind of like, that's dad, or that's my son. So yeah, all good though.
Absolutely. And you sent me a few photos and our viewers will be able to see it in the background. But why have you got a yellow tinted visor? Was that normal, or did you have a choice of visor colour?
No, we had a choice. You had a choice. When it wasn't, and I just have that one on right now. But when it wasn't real bright out, when it was bright, you needed the dark visor. You really did, because the sun, looking up in the sun, when dogfighting. But when it was a little bit cloudy, I found the yellow visor picked up, the contrast with other jets much better. I usually pop my visor up once I was inside of the other, jet for combat, just because I had better visual acuity, and I felt like the dark visor kind of cut out a little bit of the shading, and you really needed that shading when you're looking at which angle they're pulling or something before for a dogfight, because just one little angle off, and it can go poorly for you. So yeah, it's I just find even sunglasses today when I'm flying, I have a hard time keeping them on when I'm looking at other planes and stuff.
Brilliant.
Just degrades your view a little bit, yeah.
Well, on the side there, I'm sure you can see there's some questions starting to come in for you here, Steamer. So, guys, get your questions coming in. This is going to be a brilliant Q&A, but hopefully you'll enjoy this one, Steamer.
Oh, you bet. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, brother. I see Scott Fardell asks, were you tempted to join the Blue Angels? Well, Scott, I'll be honest with you. The Blue Angels, while a magnificent flying team, precision, impressive, a lot of us that were real fighter pilots didn't consider them, want to be us. It was more of a pretty boy kind of program. And whilst they're the best in the world, I truly believe, that wasn't something that I had any desire to. I was a fighter pilot. My job was to go out and stop the enemy, not to show how well I could fly in little blue suits to people around. So, nothing against them. Everybody has their own place and what they desire. But for me, missiles on target, bombs on target was what I really wanted to do. So not really. The next question I have here is a neuropilot. This is, other than carrier landings and auto sweep, how similar are the two jets? Well, the F-3 and the Tornado, the F-3 and the Tomcat were very similar in their mission. They were a forward air, interdiction fighter designed to meet the enemy out and stop them, to help with the attack planes getting in. So, I mean, their mission was basically the same. Now, we did it a little bit differently just because, different missions, different abilities of planes and stuff. But the overall mission of the Tornado and the Tomcat were really pretty much identical in overall scope. Hope that answers your question there, Neuropilot. Byron Farrow, thoughts on squadron culture in the USN compared to the Royal Air Force? Well, Byron, I was at the RAG, the Replacement Air Group, where they train the new pilots on the Tornado. So things are a little different than a forward frontline, fighter squadron. There's a lot of camaraderie and stuff, and we had, you had a black time affair with the Royal Air Force pretty much, it seemed like, every week, which was a lot of fun. But it's a little different than going to a frontline fire squadron, because there, you're going into combat. Every day you're counting on your fellow pilots for your back and stuff like that. And this, we were in a training environment, so a little different than my experience, obviously, as a fighter pilot in the Navy. So, but you made a lot of tremendous friends with the Brits over there. Had a great time. A lot of great guys. I mean, just really fabulous people. My wife and I enjoyed our tour tremendously. John Minter asks, what is your opinion of the Super Hornet as a Navy air superiority fighter? Well, John, obviously, I haven't dealt with the Super Hornet that much. I dealt with the F-18 Charlies and earlier's quite a bit. We fought against them a lot. And the Hornet, while a great day VFR fighter, was very limited in several areas. It was gas critical. It was slow in comparison to, like the Tomcat. Couldn't haul that much hardware. It was limited in a lot of ways. It, had a much shorter radar. When we went, in mixed sections, which means with a Tomcat and a Hornet, they had a really good raw suite. The radar warning to tell us who was looking at them and stuff. But overall, I'd have taken an upgraded Tomcat any day. So the Super Hornet, I know, has better electronics, and it's a more advanced jet, but I've heard it still has problems with speed, fuel as well. The overall design is, it can't match up to what a Tomcat could do, but of course the Tomcat's day had come and gone as well. So it's the future rages on. Timberwolf asks, do you happen to have any cool UFO stories? Also, ever do any low-level training over Galway, Southwest Scotland? Well, as far as UFOs, I never saw anything that I couldn't identify. There are unidentified flying objects. There were other planes up there, but no aliens for me. I'm sorry, Timberwolf. But as far as low levels, I did a tremendous amount of low levels in the Tornado. I mean, we were a fighter, but they let us down low. My last flight in the Tornado was going up through all the locks on the low levels up there. So yeah, I was down at 100, 200 feet, zorching over, seeing the castles and the locks. Truly beautiful. I mean, absolutely gorgeous flying. Christopher Bailey asks, so what happens on ultra long sorties and ops with regards to going to the bathroom? Do you have some kind of a bag or bottle to go in? Sorry if that is a horrid question, but I always wondered. Yeah, kind of funny, Christopher. We do. We have a small Ziploc bag, it has a sponge in it, designed just for those sorties, because especially in the Navy, you're out there holding before you land at night. You need to go ahead and take care of any business before you're going to go. Now, that was obviously, number one. Number two, we didn't mess with. But yeah, it's the relief bags were always in the jet. You always had one with you, especially on long flights. The Freckle Puny asks, in the worst weather, rain, snow, darkness, etc., what do you think would handle better, the F-14 or the Tornado F-3? Or would they be equal? Wow, that's a good question, Puny. I tell you what, truthfully, I'd probably take the Tornado over the Tomcat in real bad weather landing. The Tomcat's HUD was a really fantastic HUD for air combat, bombing, and strafing. But the needles, which are your ILS needles, your ACS needles, they were up high on the HUD, really placed up high. So to fly those, you'd have to look up and then down at the boat. So we were mostly heads down, meaning we flew the instruments within the jet, coming aboard the boat. Whereas the Tornado had a much better instrument HUD. You could fly it in the weather a lot easier than the Tomcat's HUD. So truthfully, I'd take the Tornado's HUD over the Tomcat's HUD, at least the F-14A and B, really pretty much any day for bad weather. So I'd give the Tornado the win on that one. Hacken Engelman. Did the naval aviation life ever get boring overall, especially compared to your present civilian airline life? Wow, Hackman, I'd have to, sorry, Hakan, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. The life on the carrier never got dull. It was, ops were almost 24/7 most of the time. You were, whenever there was something bad happened anywhere in the world, the first thing the president did was, where's my nearest aircraft carrier? And they sent us there. So very little, boringness. And even when we weren't doing that, you were doing day and night traps, and a night trap never gets boring. That is, it takes you about 2 weeks to get off the carrier to just settle down, and it takes you about 2 to 3 hours after a night trap just to get ready so you could actually maybe go to sleep. So I wouldn't put boring on it. Airline life is a lot more sedate, a lot more relaxed. Yeah, we have some long days, but nothing like flying off the carrier or that. Scott Farnell, oh, you're welcome, Scott. It says, I can't ask one more question. Are the U.S. Navy fighter squadrons kept completely separate from the U.S. Marine Corps fighter squadrons? They sure are, Hakam. While they might be on the carrier when we don't have enough squadrons, we will augment them with another squadron of Marine Corps. But in my life, we had one squadron join us in the America, but Marine Corps squadrons are completely separate, but sometimes they do have integrated on the carrier because they are naval aviators just the same. Byron asks, thanks for the previous response. It said, did you fly the F-14A and B equally? Thoughts on both? Were the engines that bad, or is that overblown? Actually, I flew the F-14A and the B in the RAG. That's when we first start flying Tomcats. And then my first squadron was A's, and my second squadron, we transitioned to B's right after I got there. So I flew both extensively, and the stories about the engines are not overblown. The F-14A, the Pratt & Whitney, the TF-30s were horrid. They'd stall when joining up on another aircraft at 30,000 feet, just really horrid. The F-14B engines were absolutely phenomenal. You could be up at 50, 60, 70,000 feet idle back to full burner with no cough in the engine, no stall ever. They were just phenomenal. They were the engine the Tomcat was actually designed to have originally. So yeah, it was a completely different plane. We'd take off and you'd be at 1-to-1 thrust to weight almost right after takeoff. So in the F-14B engines, really nice. Okay, SPQR77. What are the positives and negatives of major airlines as a pilot? Wow, 77, I'd have to say, the negatives, obviously, you're working for a corporation and, your job isn't to protect the populace or anything. It's to get people into place where you're, safely. So, it's a great job and I enjoy it very much. Haggling with unions and pay and stuff like that can be kind of a pain in the tail. And you get some really long days, but we had long days in the Navy too. So it's a great life. Really blessed to have it. And it's allowed me to have a lot of time with my family and do a lot of wonderful things and go a lot of places. Let's see, should the U.S., I think this is Ground Zero or Zigzag, should the U.S., UK bring back the forced military draft to serve the narratives of Nazism? Wow, Zigzag, I don't know about the narratives of Nazism. I don't see that. I'm not going to get into politics, stuff heavily, but I think it'd be great if everybody served their country, because I think it would change our youth to more of a service, personal responsibility type group. But like I said, I don't know about the narrative of Nazism. So the freckled Puny asks, which F-14 tactics could be brought over to the Tornado F3 and vice versa? Well, Puny, when I was in the Tornado, they were actually changing their tactics, really, in the way in which they attack targets and fight, to really a lot of the stuff that they brought out of the F-14, or vice versa. Because when they came over, they were still using some very old tactics in the F3 squadron when I first got there, not dealing with target aspect, but for reattacking targets and stuff and displacement. And whilst I was on exchange with the 56 Squadron, they had, fighter weapons guys that were on exchange with VF-101, which I got to meet when I was over there as well, which is the Tornado or the Tomcat rag. So they were, upgrading some of their tactics as well. So really, the tactics were very similar, in the end. I mean, because when you start looking at things like target aspect, that's what the missile sees. And if you're not doing that with your jet or understanding it, you're probably not performing to your jet's utmost ability. As Hakan says, what's your view of the suitability of the F-35B and F-35C regarding speed, number of engines, and range? Well, Hakan, I'm obviously, that's after my time. But I've flown with several of the guys that do fly the F-35. As a matter of fact, one of the guys was the test pilot that accepted the Navy version, which is the newest F-35 that we have out. And he said, while it wasn't, the dogfighter of an F-22, it wasn't, quite as impressive in that role. What it did do, it gave you a picture that really no other plane has. Electronically, visually, it's way beyond. They don't come in mixed section or in sections anymore. They're several miles apart because they know everything that's happening. They're really, really an impressive plane. Now, as far as basic dogfighting, I wouldn't want to put it up against a F-22, that's for sure. But as far as knowing what's going on and handling the air battle, they're absolutely phenomenal. And mind you, it's not like they're a horrible dogfighter or something. I mean, they'd still, you beat an F-16, but I mean, they're not what a 22 is. It's, but the technology advance is just absolutely amazing from what I understand. Okay, let's see. Andrew Richard. In terms of overall flight performance from BVR to range, which aircraft is best suited to each flight regime? Obviously, the Tornado and the F-3. I mean, the Tornado did a really nice job. Its radar was maybe not as strong as the Tomcats with the AUG-9. And of course, we had a lot bigger missiles. So in the Tornado, you had to get in closer. But the overall, I mean, in BVR, Tomcat was a little stronger. That with bigger engines and, a little thicker wings. So obviously the Tomcat was a little stronger in BVR. But the Tornado did a great job. And here's also something that a lot of people fail to realize on that, Andrew, is the flying a jet like that, even if one has a little better performance, it comes down to a lot as who's in the plane. I fought several F-15, E's when I was flying the F-3, and we tore them up. So whilst the F-15E is a really, it's an impressive aircraft, the Tornado did really well because it depends on how you employ it. And you have to know your tactics for your certain plane. If you, go up into a dogfight with an F-16 and you get into an energy fight with the big engine F-16, you were going to lose. But if you fought your own fight and you did it smartly, then you wouldn't. And that's the whole key right there, is knowing your fight and doing it properly. Sorry there, I lost our chat there for a second. I'll get this right back up here with you for 1 second. Okay, and I'm back. Anyway, so it comes down to a lot of it. Who's in the jet? If you fly your jet wrong, you'll get shot down by a MiG-21 with unimproved ATOLs, and you're flying a fifth generation fighter. It's a very big part of it is who's driving the aircraft. Okay, let's see. Timberwolf asks, what's your favorite overseas, out of the town, or larking with the dude's memory with foreign forces? Wow, I tell you what, this one was probably with the Brits. We were going down to Akrotiri down in off Cyprus, and or actually we were in Cyprus, I'm sorry, and we were down there for a weapons detachment with the Tornadoes. And I came down a couple of days later, and the guys had been there 2 days, and they maybe had a couple of pints. I'm just saying, they were Brits, and so we had a couple. And the next morning we went out, and when I got to bed a little earlier. We were in a foreign country, and of course Cyprus is divided half between the Greeks and half between the Turks, and they didn't allow people to cross over with the Turks, on that at all. So the even flying over it, and they had surface to air missiles. They were very serious about their operation. Anyway, so we got up that morning, and we had an early morning brief, went out, did a 4 combat, and but just about before the end of the sortie, the instructor looked over, because I was still a student at the time, going through instructor workups, and he goes, "Steamer, you good coming back? You got the lead." And sounded like you might be gagging a little bit. Anyway, from the night before. So I led us back in, at 500 knots coming in for the break, and the line between Turkey and Greece was right there. And I was like, hope I'm in the right spot. So it just made me laugh tremendously. So anyway, just one of the fun stories over there with the Royal Air Force. Okay. John Minter asks, whilst flying the Tomcat on CAP missions from the carrier, did you encounter any enemy aircraft? Oh, many times we did. John, I mean, you'd see the Russians would come out, or, we were in different places. A lot of times, we'd launch off and you'd go into country. Like when we were in, Bosnia, helicopters, we'd have, howitzers shooting up at us. That was probably about it for that. We took quite a bit of, quite a bit of anti-aircraft fire from them. But overall, I mean, there weren't a lot because the Russians were drawing down. But we saw several times, people come out. And a lot of times it was friendly forces too that we were working with. But enemies at the time, not a lot of them were able to come up and touch us, or even get near us in a Tomcat. Even in the Gulf War, when the OG-9 would come on our radar, the MiG-29s would turn and run away because they'd fought with them against the Russians, the Iranians, and they knew what was coming. So. David Carter asks, do you think if they had re-engineered the F-3 like the Tomcat, would it have produced similar results, or was the airframe too limiting? Well, David, I will say this. I think, switching to the Typhoon as far as, airframe, I think was the right answer. I mean, the Tornado, like the Tomcat, was an older airframe that really needed a lot of changes to make it viable in the 4th and 5th generation fighter arena. They both had their time had come. They were great jets, and I enjoyed flying both of them tremendously. It was a lot of fun. But on that same side, we all get to points where, we have to move on. And, whilst it was sad for a lot of us, because we love the platforms. I mean, iconic. But no, I think it was time had come. I think the amount of change that we required would have never put it in the ability to fight with, 4th or 5th generation fighters. And the same with the Tomcat. We can update it a lot, but it just became too expensive and really, just not feasible in this day and age. SPQR77 asked, did you ever fly Tornado F-3 with Skyflash AAM? If so, was it a good missile or better than any Sparrow version? Oh yeah, I'll be honest with you. The Skyflash, which is basically a remake of the early model Sparrows, was not a great missile. If you fired it, you would really have to go to the merge because it was slow enough that even if you shot and cranked off to give yourself, spacing, you'd see the aircraft when it blew up. So if it didn't blow up the aircraft, you were in a dogfight. So yeah, I wasn't a giant Sparrow fan. Some of the newer Sparrows that we had during the Gulf War were a big improvement, but overall, I was a Phoenix Sidewinder kind of guy. Okay, it says the Freckled Puny asks, would you have liked to have flown a Typhoon or perhaps a Raphael? Of course, different aircraft would have been fun. I think a Typhoon would be a lot of fun. Or the Raphael. Now, mind you, that jet had no gas. I know that because we did some work with the French, and whilst the jet could go up to 50,000 feet straight up, just about, they were out of gas. I remember we were working off the coast of Bosnia, and I was tanking over there, and I just tanked, and a Mirage came up next to me, and he looks over at me, and we were up at about 25,000 feet, and mind you, I was in an F-14A loaded with Phoenix, Sparrow, and Sidewinder. So, and I think I even had a couple of 500-pounders on as well. So I was pretty much loaded up, full gas. He's fully loaded up. He looks over at me, hits it, and does an Immelman right next to me at 25,000 feet. So we ended up about 45,000 feet. And I mean, pure thrust away. I was pretty impressed by the aircraft, I must admit. Of course, he had to go hit the tanker right then. But really, really some impressive performance out of the jet. Okay, let's see. Neuropilot. When you were over in UK, did you meet any Brits from aerial gunnery school, etc., who came over in the early days of Top Gun program? I met an RN pilot involved in that. No, Neuropilot, I sure didn't, I'm afraid to say. Hakan asks, can you tell if your airliner co-pilot has a military background without having to ask? Hakan, yeah, most of the time you can. Sometimes you can't. I mean, there's a lot of great pilots that didn't go to the military. But I mean, just the way they move, react, and speak, usually you can tell if he was a military pilot. Andrew Richard, how did you get the name Steamer? Well, we'll just have to leave that for another time, okay? I appreciate you asking that, Andrew. G100 asks, F-14A, even with the TF-30, seems to have 3 times the climb rate of the Tornado or an EM diagram. The F-14 seems to have turning advantage and energy addition rate. So how would you beat an F-14 in a Tornado? Well, like I talked about earlier, 100, how you're fighting a jet, I mean, it all depends on what you're going to do. First of all, I would try to make sure I wasn't seen by the Tomcat's radar coming into the fight. Because if you can't be seen, pretty hard to beat somebody you can't see. So I'd probably come with my radar off and raw gear on. The raw gear in the Tornado was much superior to what we had in the Tomcat. So if you know where he's at and you can come in outside his radar scheme, that would be my first technique to try and beat a Tomcat. Because a head-on-head BVR, not BVR, but BFM engagement would probably be a little difficult to beat with a Tornado against a full-up F-14 if he is flying correctly. Bill asked, did you see Top Gun in the sequel? I sure did. And obviously love the movies. I mean, aviation movies, period. They were great movies. And, Top Gun 2 came out right at, Memorial Day for us up here. And so it brought back a lot of memories and stuff. And, my whole family went with me and it was a lot of fun. And I remember my wife, when I came out, she said, Tom, do you miss it? And I said, I love doing it, but not even a little bit. That was a young man's job. So, great memories and really glad I got to do it. But yeah, happy where I'm at right now. Jin Zhang asks, can you discuss your most memorable DACT BFM sorties while flying the F-14? Any comments on your game plan while flying against F-15, F-16 Hornet? Well, I'll tell you a story here in a second. But the, my game plan against F-16, F-15, and F-18 were always very different. F-16, first thing I wanted to do is get him on his limiter. If I could get him slow, F-16 could be easily beat. But if you let him keep his energy up, you're going to be really sorry really fast. And F-16, Big Mouth, he'd have his looping speed in about 3 seconds. So if you let him get his nose down and you didn't press him hard, he was going to beat you really badly. A Hornet on the other side flew slow, absolutely great. So if you got into a slow flight with a Hornet, very shortly you were going to be getting gunned. So very different fights. And in F-15, they would try and use the outer air battle. So there we need to use our long-range radar and Phoenix missiles to beat them. So once again, very different, tactics against different aircraft, just like you would against a MiG-29 and Su-27, those type of aircraft as well. Now, as far as most memorable sorties, wow, I mean, I have some great ones against a Tomcat, but, we did pretty well against, in DACT. So not a lot of real memorable ones against that. Some crazy stories, just flying the Tomcat period where, we're lucky to get alive. And several of those are covered in our the aircrew interview I did as well. Okay, Timberwolf asks, what's the best dissimilar aircraft, both you and that you ever heard of? The best dissimilar combat. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, when you say the best, I'm really not sure what you're asking there, Timberwolf. If it's the best I've flown against, I mean, obviously, I would have to say that the hardest jet to beat would be a slick Hornet, you know, or with a single center line. The Marines joined the USS America, and they they were flying the upgraded F-18s with the bigger engines. And I'll be honest with you, it was a very hard plane to beat. They were slick. They could fly slow unit like we couldn't. I mean, they were just an impressive jet. It was impressive. And of course, now with the F-22s and such, I mean, we couldn't touch them. G110 asks, did you ever interact with Snort? What are your thoughts about Snort? Also, did you ever, were you ever in any ACM do Snort like dropping big boys down in a slow speed fight and use them BFM? Well, kind of funny. I joined VF-33 just after Snort had left. He was the skipper of VF-33, and that was my first fighter squadron. And the guys there loved him. They did. Snort was obviously a very impressive Tomcat pilot. And he operated on the very edge of the rules as far as flying the jet, dropping the flaps and stuff. And he taught his pilots to do that. And had I dropped the big boys dogfighting before? Of course I had. But the thing is, you had to be very careful there because you could damage the aircraft to where you couldn't use it again. Now, you might win that DACT sortie or that, you know, ACM segment, but if the jet wasn't able to go out flying the next day, it may not have been the best plan. And also with the big flaps down, you were limited to guns only, so you couldn't shoot any missiles. So whilst it was, it made the Tomcat perform unbelievably well, it also limited you in what you could do with the jet. But yeah, as far as Snort goes, he was obviously considered one of the greatest Tomcat pilots, and I saw him fly on one of our tax ranges, and he was a very good driver. No two ways about it. Very impressive in the plane. Okay, Jin Zhang asks, can you discuss the difference between flying BFM between the F-14A and B? What is the predictor of success of F-14A winning against an F-14B or another fighter with a superior thrust-to-weight ratio? Well, Jin, I'm going to say right now is the F-14A pilot had to, or the B pilot had to make a mistake for the F-14A to win. The thrust-to-weight was just so much superior. Just like fighting the, you know, Hornets before they got the real big engines. You know, we go down, get a little bit slow, then you just thrust away, go straight up, come over the top with a hot mode and shoot him in the face. An F-14A couldn't fight an F-14B with, like I said, unless they made, the B guy made a big mistake, the B would win every day. Says, should the U.S. Air Force have bought the F-14 to replace the F-106? The Freckled Puny asks again. You know, I tell you what, the F-15 is a great jet for the Air Force, and so is the F-16. They do a great job. The F-20s, I won't question them on the 106, and that was a little bit before my time as well, so I won't even jump there. John Picard asks, how would the Hawk T1 perform against the F-14? Well, I mean, I flew the Hawk. Obviously, went through training up in Wales. I'm going to have to say, John, I doubt the Hawk would do too well. Once again, it's like anything else. You know, we talked about, you know, how you fight your jet and what you see. If the Hawk got in unseen, well, you'll shoot the Tomcat down, just like it would an F-22. But on that same side of things, unless, I mean, if you were in a normal fight up at altitude, pretty hard to get in unseen. So it comes down to the tactics and the guy flying the plane. But yeah, very hard to beat a modern fighter with, you know, something like a Hawk. Okay, Avio Vintage. He asks, he says, hi, Seymour, love the interviews. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Did you ever go up against and beaten by a Harrier, any type? I heard some cool stories about Sea Harriers doing quite well during Red Flag. Well, Avio, I have to say, I flew against some Harriers. Now, not Sea Harriers, but they were, you know, U.S. Marines. And I'll be honest with you, as long as you didn't fight their fight, they were very easy to beat. Now, mind you, if you got in close and got slow, you know, the Harrier could just stop on a dime and point over and shoot you. But yeah, they were very limited. I mean, above 10,000 feet, they were extreme bleeders as far as energy goes. Not really a challenge as long as you fought a smart fight. And once again, if you get into you fight their fight, just like if you got into you're fighting a Cessna 172 with sidewinders mounted on it. If you got down and got into a single circle fight with a guy, he's going to pull over and shoot at you. So you just have to be smart about what you're doing. But yeah, I didn't find the Harriers to be much of a challenge in the Tomcat at all. Hakan asks, the U.S. Armed Forces has recently experienced a bit of dip in recruitment. At what level will it start trying really hard to hit the quality in regards to aviation? Hakan, I really can't speak to that right now. I know this, going through naval flight school, if you weren't good, you weren't making it through. So even if the recruitments are up or down, there's a certain level of acceptability because the carrier is that great equalizer. We lost one pilot, or one plane, I should say, every cruise on average, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then in training accidents, I mean, I have a lot of friends that aren't here anymore, and they were great pilots. So whether the recruitment's up or down, we'll have the same quality fighter pilots, I think, in the Navy. And that's all I can speak to in the Marine Corps. So I don't think that'll affect it at all. Bill asks, do you think Navy pilots are intrinsically better than USAF and RAF pilots? Bill, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that we're intrinsically better. Do I think we're the best in the world? Definitely. But here's the deal. We had to be that good because we had to land on the carrier. Could Air Force pilots do it? Perhaps. Some could, some couldn't. But it wasn't that we were better. It's just that we had to be better. It's an individual thing on ability and stuff, and we're just trained differently. So no, I wouldn't say we're necessarily, the pilot themselves are better, but in our program, you had to be better. I hope that answers your question. Neuropilot asks, ever had a jet from a non-friendly country turn into you repeatedly, like the 81 Gulf Sidra dogfight, Captain Kleeman and Admiral Venya? No, I didn't. Neuropilot never had that experience. It's on the OG-9, if you're in track while scan, once you turn, their target's going to look like it turns into you as well. So, but I never had anything like that where it was true aggression by the other pilots, putting us into a situation where we would be in combat or something similar to that. Timberwolf asks, did you ever fish off the back of the boat? No, we didn't, Timberwolf. The aircraft carrier is 62 feet, the flight deck down to the water. So it'd be pretty hard to fish off that. And the carrier's moving pretty much all the time, at least 20 knots. So yeah, it would be very difficult to do any fishing. Whilst a big outdoorsman myself and love to fish and hunt, we weren't able to. Mind you, I did see a lot of sharks, whales, dolphins, and off the coast of Somalia, a lot of sea snakes at night down off the hangar too. Bad 21, any good muskie fishing stories? I tell you what, we go up to Lake of the Woods every year muskie fishing, but I'll try and stay on target here for aviation for now. Appreciate it. Azin Zhang asks, excuse me, did you ever use flaps to improve your turn rate or reduce your turn radius while fighting in the F-14? Yeah, Jen, I had mentioned that earlier. We definitely did in VF-33. Like I said, there was a kind of a history of it. As Snort was the ex-CO of the squadron when I came in. So yeah, there was a bit of that. And the aircraft performed amazingly, with the flaps down. But like I said, you were limited to guns only and no missiles. Julius Dabroa, and I hope I pronounced it right there. Both Tomcat and the Tornado F3 were designed for long cap. What are your thoughts on endurance of both jets, both in terms of ferry flight and actual flight with afterburner usage? Julius, the Tomcat had about a 2.5 to 3 hour range at max conserve. But of course, in every place we went, we had tanker support, and the same would be with the Tornado. So, as far as long range endurance, I think they were pretty similar in a lot of ways as far as the range and ability to cap. So, I wouldn't put either one in an advantageous position on that. I think they were both pretty capable in that range. Of course, and then you say an afterburner usage. Well, in long range cap, unless you were engaging with someone, afterburner was not something you wanted to use. In F-14B in full afterburner, you could burn all your fuel, about 20,000 pounds, in about 8 to 10 minutes. So it would go away rather quickly if you used afterburner. And Timberwolf asks, can you talk about any poignant memories during combat sorties? Apologies if not relevant. Well, a couple of stories I shared, on my interview previous to Mike. So I'd recommend you see those. Told a couple stories about, times that things turned a little south, heading at the water, playing out of control. And, unfortunately, you saw a lot of those. Or landing on the carrier, I didn't mention, it was one time I had a full hydraulic failure and getting aboard the carrier. And it didn't look like we were going to get back that night. But luckily we did by the grace of God. So yeah, there were a lot of times like that. But I'm going to keep on here today because they're a long, slow story. So, John Minter asks, what Navy fighter, past or present, would you like to have flown that you didn't get to fly? And did you ever sing Danger Zone to yourself while preparing to launch off the carrier? No, John, I didn't sing that song. Of course, there's a reason why I flew jets and didn't sing, because a man's got to know his limitations, okay? And singing is not one of my repertoire. As far as flying jets, I got to fly, the Hornet and the Tomcat 16. I almost went to fly F-4s with the Luftwaffe instead of the Tornado, but I chose the Tornado instead. And truthfully, I was excited and happy to fly what I did. So I'd have to say no. I'm good with what I did on that one. But when I was getting ready to fly into combat off the carrier, or into a sortie where it might be a little interesting, I did listen to a little music. Nirvana was more my speed on that, or some good 80s rock. But no Danger Zone for this guy. Hakan asks, did you ever ride the fighter jock journey all the way to the end, or did you get out early? Okay, and what were your feelings like during your last flight in a fighter jet? Oh no, I got after my tour on the F3. I had a wife and a little girl, and at that point we were at war, and the U.S. Navy didn't need another fighter pilot, but she needed a daddy, and that was at home. That wasn't putting flying aircraft above their family, and that's what I chose to do. And that's not to put down anybody else that made different choices. But for me, it was time to be home with my family, and I don't regret it for a moment. I had a great time, a wonderful career, and flew fabulous aircraft and made great friends. But as far as staying in, it just wasn't for me. It says, on what were your feelings your last flight? It was exciting and fun. Like I said, my last flight was in a Tornado, and I was flying over the locks up through Scotland, enjoying. It's just a really beautiful scenery. I saw a couple of people up on doing a little hiking up on this hill, and I blew them over about 20 feet. They were laying flat. So yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was I have no regrets, and like I said, and whilst there's times you miss some of that, I don't miss being away from my family or getting shot at or landing on the boat at night. That's for sure. Paul Smith asks, could you talk us through your first ever carrier landing was like? Wow. Well, Paul, that was actually in a T2, the Buckeye, in training in the Navy. And the first time you land in the carrier, you're alone. You've been going through training, you've been practicing this on the ground, and on a shore-based facility. Well, they take you out in a four-ship. You do the brake, which is a maneuver in which you come over the carrier and you brake to bleed off speed, and then you roll in behind the carrier, and nothing ever prepares you for what it looks like, because you turn right abeam the end of the carrier, and you look at it and go, there's no way I can ever make it. I'm way too tight. You keep turning and you're staying on your instruments. At the 90-degree point, you look over and you go, I'm still too close. I can't make it. As you roll into the groove at about 325 feet, you look at the carrier and you go, well, maybe I can make it. But all you have is this just tiny little spot that you're going to land on. You go, it just doesn't look right. But of course, they're driving away at about 20 knots on the carrier. And as you come in, as you get in closer, you're like, well, maybe. And all of a sudden you trap aboard and you're just like, wow, that hook grabs and you get flung forward, and it looks like nothing you've ever done. That's for sure. It was one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life. Really, really, truly memorable and exciting. Andrew Richard asks, traditionally, the Tornado was designed as a low-level strike aircraft. So down low is a beast. How would you rate the Tomcat in similar sorties since they eventually became a bomb truck too? Well, the Tornado did perform much better with the high bypass turbofan engines it had down low. You know, in the fighter, and I guess in the attack variant as well. I didn't fly that. And we did a lot of sorties down low because the Tornado's original tactic against the Russians was to come in low to avoid the radars and, you know, the surface air threat that obviously they would pose. So the aircraft was a little bit different. The Tomcat was great down low. It was a really, really big platform. It was kind of like driving a big Cadillac. You know, you get out on the road and you're like, it was just smooth and big. And with the air tunnels down below in the Tomcat, it made for a lifting body. And it was just exceedingly smooth. The Tomcat was a great bomber. As a matter of fact, the Tomcat, just as a mill bomber, meaning its basic setup, was a better bomber than the A6, just off the rails. And of course, then when we got the Lantern pod, you know, with smart weapons and stuff, it was very, very capable. But, you know, and I didn't obviously deal with bombing in the Tornado, just air-to-air stuff. Johnny Two Combs asked, did you ever meet the legendary Dale, well, he said Snodgrass. Oh, yes, several times I did. Yes, I sure did. A really nice guy. And like I said, beloved by his squadron. You know, almost all the guys. I joined the squadron at the end of the Gulf War, just as they were coming back. So all the guys have worked with Snort the whole time, and he was thought of greatly by his people. The pilots loved him. So I have nothing but good things to say about him. And I didn't fly under him personally, but I saw him fly several times, as I mentioned earlier. Says the Freckle Puny asks, which land-based fighter do you rate the highest? Well, I'd have to see the F-22. Just its overall performance, internal carriage, super cruise. It's a phenomenal jet. Luckily, though, Obama cut the dies, so we will see no more F-22, and the F-22 will actually be going away. So kind of a sad thing. G110S. Can you talk about MCB? I heard the TF-30, there was a mid-compression bypass valve, and pulling the circuit breaker gave an additional 4,000 pounds of thrust. No, G110. From what I understand you're talking about, when we did not have that in the TF-30s. We didn't pull circuit breakers to get extra thrust out of the engines, and we never dealt with any of that. So I might be mistaken because I was not an engine man, obviously, but you know, most of the pilots would have known if we could get an extra 4,000 pounds of thrust out of an engine, we'd have been doing it, because the TF-30 was greatly, you know, underpowered for the aircraft. Bad 21. Oh, by the way, Timberwolf, you're welcome. And all the guys, there's several people that have said thanks on here. And guys, you're more than welcome, and I appreciate you mention it. Bad 21 asks, were the flaps limited to 2.5 Gs and 225 knots? You know, Bat, you're asking questions now that are 30 years ago. I can't remember the exact G limits on the flaps. But the thing is, when you got the flaps down, you weren't pulling more than, you know, 3 or 4 Gs to start with. So I don't know if it's 2.5 Gs or 4 Gs, but you weren't pulling a lot of Gs anyway, because then you were getting into a, you know, basically a flat scissors type situation where, you know, we were slow flighting the jet, trying to get slower instead, or turning real slow over to take the shot. Of course, the problem is once you get the flaps down and you get slow, you've made your bed. Now you're staying in that fight until the end. So, you know, it better be your last ditch maneuver, or you better really need to win this one, because you're not going to escape from that. Normally in a Tomcat with the flaps up, you know, if you make a pass and things aren't looking good, especially in a B, you take the guy 180 out, you know, full afterburner. He's not shooting you with anything. Okay, Xin Yang asks, Top Gun 2 reference. What do you think happens in real life if an 06 throws a NATOPS manual into the trash during a debrief? You know, I mean, I mean, kind of irrelevant. You know, I mean, it depends on where you're at and what you're doing. I mean, you know, it's a different world now. So I don't know. In my day, people would have just laughed. I mean, whatever. We still fly by the rules on the jet. You know, the NATOPS was written in blood, we used to say, because every rule we had in there because somebody died. The Navy didn't change the rules until we lost a jet, and usually the air crew in it. So NATOPS was never really thrown out. I mean, that's how we learned to fly the jet, and that's what we did. So Ray Lauterbach asks, did you feel that the Tomcat was at a disadvantage in the later years with the Sparrow, or do tactics compensate for any deficiencies? Ray, I'm not sure. I went to fly the Tornado in 95 to 98. And then I got out after that. So, the later years in the Tomcat, I know they were, they weren't putting money into it. And without the Phoenix, the Tomcat was very limited in what it could do. I mean, as far as long range, we were limited to what basically an F-15 could do. So, without the Phoenix, yeah, it would have been a great degrading to the overall combat performance for the aircraft. In tactics, obviously, we got some newer raw gear, which helps. And just like when I was flying the Tornado, if you're running against a plane with a larger missile, longer BVR range on it, you have to fool the radar. You have to get out of their line of sight, because if they can shoot you out at distance and you can't get away from it, I mean, you'll die before you get to the merge. So yeah, you have to come up with different tactics on that. Okay, Zin Yang asks again, can you tell us a story of the moose head dangling behind your left? Oh, that's not a moose. That's a white-tailed deer I shot down in Florida. Obviously, I do quite a bit of hunting and fishing, and that's just a beautiful animal I shot down there, so while hunting. But no real great stories on it. Bill asks, which Tornado Squadron were you with and based at? Bill, I was with 56 Squadron. That's the replacement air group. That's where they train the new Tornado pilots. And of course, pilots that are coming back through to go to different squadrons, or that have been, away from the Tornado for a while. So that was the squadron I was based in. Okay, the next question says, have you seen the adversary F-5s and F-16 use a FLIR TCS pod during ACM? A friend nailed an F-22 from an F-5 using FLIR on a winder, basically one circle fight downhill. Neuro, I tell you what, we didn't have FLIRs on our F-5s or the F-16s. The Tomcat had one. If they put them on there, yeah, it can be used and effectively. But once again, an F-5, when you're fighting it, like in a Tomcat, we could beat it in radius and rate. What we had to worry about was really fighting their fight. And an F-5, if you got in a downhill spiral with it, he would kick you out because he could fly so slow going downhill like this with his speed brakes out that you'd pop out in front of him. So once again, an inferior jet beating a superior jet just because you were letting him fly his tactics. Okay, the next question. Bat 21. What are your thoughts of the Eurofighter Typhoon? Bat, it's a beautiful jet. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. Haven't flown it, and I don't know anybody who has. So I really can't speak as an expert on the Typhoon. But I will say this: most jets that are pretty fly great. Kind of designed after birds, and in the sky you see the falcons and birds that are sleek and kind of slippery in the air. They fly better, and most fighters kind of follow that same design. The Drone Monkey asks, how do you find your workload on your wings course? How difficult T-34, T-2, Buckeye? Oh, and getting my wings in the Navy. It was very challenging. I'll just be square, Drone. There were 100 guys in my class when I first started the Navy, and 2 of us ended up in fighters. It was a very challenging course to get through. You're graded on every single flight, and 3 unsatisfactory flights, as they considered them, you were done flying, with the Navy. So it was, the pressure was on the whole time. And it was about a 4-year program when I went through to get through. So, it was a long road. Hakan asks, do you have a choice as a naval aviator not to be in the reserves, at least for a while, at the point of departure from active service? Well, Hakan, I had a regular commission. There's regular commission and reserve commissions. As a regular commission, you were actually always in the reserve. They could call me up tomorrow, even now. I mean, obviously an old man not calling me up, but they could call me up tomorrow if they really needed me. And of course I would go serve. But as a reserve pilot, you'll actually get out and you don't have any more commitments. Jen asks, was there any significant difference in the HUD symbology between the F-14A and B? No, they had the same HUDs, Jen. The D had a new HUD, but we didn't have that in the A or B. And of course, in the Tornado, had a really fabulous HUD. Really, really like the HUD on that one. Like I said, as far as instrument flying especially, it was far superior to what we had in the Tomcat. The Freckled Puny asks, what do you think of a foreign carriers such as the Charles de Gaulle and Chinese and Indian developments? Well, I mean, obviously they're improving and gives them a lot of capabilities, but foreign carriers aren't landing and taking off at night. And that's where the U.S. Navy really has its thing. Underway replenishments as well. We take fuel on board from other boats, while, ships, I guess you call them. We call the aircraft the boat, while driving. And of course, landing at night and taking off at night, that's when we do our business. Fighter pilots, especially attacks and stuff now at night, that's it. So, when they get to that point, we'll start getting pretty worried. Gasville asks, hello. He said, did you enjoy living on CV? Was it a crowded place from your perspective? Well, I tell you what, that's kind of a funny story, because when you first get on the carrier, it is ungodly loud. The fighter pilots are all one deck below the flight deck. So you're right down from the catapult and the arresting system. So the noise was just tremendous. The first week out, you can't even sleep. But after a while, you get so tired, you just pass out and you get some sleep. But life in the carrier was hard. The food was questionable. I mean, the accommodation was questionable, but the most exciting thing you'd ever do in your life. You're living on basically a battleship. And the whole job of that 7,000 guys on that ship was to put you in the air. It was a neat experience. And I tell you, every single ride, launching off there and recovering, was a e-ticket ride. I mean, you went from 0 to 150 miles an hour in a little less than 2 seconds. The fastest acceleration of anything known to man. So it was pretty wild. Pretty wild.
So, Steamer, I'm going to jump in here because we've got 5 minutes left. If you want to pick a couple of more questions to answer, there's a few maybe new ones, but if you want to do that for us, that'd be great.
I sure will. Yeah, let me look down here and see, get somebody that we haven't touched on. It says Fireball 2 2018. Hello, Tornado question. What was the maximum speed down low that you ever achieved or heard of? Down low, wow. Down there we were usually more like 5 or 600 knots. I did see about 1.7 up in the air doing a high speed intercept on that, but the Tomcat I got a little faster on that. But we were down somewhere around I think I got up to probably 750, 700. Down a little bit low on the Tornado as I think about it. Diego asks, thanks for your service. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Diego. I was really blessed to be able to do it. Says, did you feel comfortable flying with a good reel? And did the crew concept benefit different missions you guys performed? Thank you. Diego, you bet. And you're more than welcome. For sure. I tell you, a great reel was worth its weight in gold. A bad reel, I'd rather have the gas. No, as far as especially smart missions where we were shooting missiles because they'd use the radar and target them, or smart bombs and stuff, a reel was phenomenal. So I could keep track of the other jets. I could use, scanning for other aircraft, and he could prep the weapon before we launched it. So no, a reel was a great addition in the Tomcat. Let's see. David Carter, did you have a favorite port of call in the U.S. or overseas? Yeah, probably my favorite was we pulled into Marseille, France. And it was wonderful people. The French people were actually extremely friendly and fun, and a lot of beautiful ladies. So yeah, enjoyed it greatly. John Picard asks, Squadrons have their own traditions and initiations for new crew members. That was a memorable prank that may have allegedly happened that you remember, where the Brits or the Navy best. Truthfully, something, John? We didn't have a lot of pranks in any of my squadrons. We were fighter pilots, and we got pretty serious about it. So, yeah, I didn't really see any of that. Hakan asks, approximately how much training in percent could you skip compared to a fresh starter when you transferred to civilian aircraft flying? Well, Hakan, they don't train you to fly in the airlines. What they do is they train you to follow their SOPs. They're hiring you because you already know how to fly. I mean, to get hired in as a major, such as, United, Delta, American, you have to know how to fly the aircraft, and that's what they expect from you. So it wasn't a tremendous amount of training. You had to learn the new jet just like you would in any place. But they don't train you to fly. They just train you to follow their rules and some different communications and stuff like that. And so Johnny Tucombe said, did any Brits come over to fly the Tomcat or heard of any? Oh, yeah, we had, like I said earlier, we had several that would come out. We'd have an opposite exchange. A pilot would come over to 56 Squadron, and one of yours, usually a fighter weapons guy, would come over and fly the Tomcat in VF-101. Don Telewan says, hello, sir. Did you spend any time AR NAS Oceana? If so, what did you think of it? NAS Oceana was my base. So yeah, I was with VF-101, went through training there, and then I flew with VF-33 and 102. So it was a great base. Long runways or right off the beach where we had great working areas. It was a fabulous place to fly from, and a lot of fun too. Emil Baird asks, what is your opinion on the F-14D and its improved capabilities compared to the A and B? The D was a phenomenal jet. Improved radar, nicer HUD. Yeah, it was a phenomenal jet. It was just an upgrade and a great one at that. Wish we'd done that and turned them all into F-14D quick strikes, which were very capable jets. Jen asked, did you ever play Danger Zone on the in-flight intercom when you're No, Jen, I didn't play that. We just didn't. We liked the movie, but no, we didn't do that. Anyway, guys, I think we're about to wrap it up here. I see Mike's coming back on.
Yes, we're going to wrap up here. I think that's a great way to end here, Steamer. What a brilliant Q&A, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully, Steamer, you enjoyed it as well. But what's looking for the future for you? Just chilling out for the rest of your retirement?
Well, it's kind of funny, Mike. I almost feel like I'm in retirement. I flew in the Navy for about 10 and a half years, and I loved it. Seriously, all I can say is positive things. I got to do an exchange tour with the Royal Air Force, and they were fabulous. Made great friends over there. Saw a different culture. Flew in combat in the Tomcat. Seriously, I'm blessed. I'm blessed that I made it through unscathed. I've got a wonderful family and 4 kids. I praise the Lord. I'm thankful for all I got to do. For next, I'm an airline pilot now, and it's kind of like in a lot of ways being in retirement. Get my dog out to do a little bird hunting. Do a little trout fishing here and there, and just enjoying life. Yeah, really, and just thankful every day. It's truly blessed.
Absolutely, and I'm sure myself and our viewers are going to wish you well for the future of you and your family and everything like that. But Steamer, thank you very much for coming on this Q&A. It's been absolutely brilliant. What a way to get back into this, because we haven't done a Q&A for quite a while now due to other things happening. But this has been brilliant. So Steamer, thank you very much. And to our viewers and followers, thank you very much for doing this and coming in and putting the brilliant questions in.
And I'd like to just jump in for a second too. Mike, you were a true gentleman in this whole thing. I really enjoyed it. You're a class act, and all the questions are great too. I appreciate the audience and just really great people. Aviation people are usually really good people, and this just goes to prove that point. And thank you so much for everything. I had a blast. It was kind of a little, 10 years at first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this, but it actually turned out to be great, and I couldn't recommend it higher to anyone. So it was really fun, and thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, have a nice, it's be daytime for you, but everyone else who joined us, have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. But thank you again.
You bet. Cheers. Y'all have a great one now.
Cheers.